What's the price of fame? For some child sitcom stars, it was their own future. One day, they're the biggest name in television, and the next, they're a trivia question. It's a pattern we've seen over and over again. A bright, shining star seems to burn out, leaving us all wondering what happened to them. The story of our first star is one you think you know, but the truth is way different. 1. Jonathan Taylor Thomas. If you were a kid in the 90s, you knew JTT. Jonathan Taylor Thomas was more than just an actor. He was a phenomenon. As Randy Taylor on the massive hit show Home Improvement, he was the smart, witty, and charming middle son who got all the best lines. He wasn't just a TV star, though. He was the voice of young Simba in Disney's The Lion King, a role that made him a household name around the globe. His face was on every teen magazine, and he was poised to become the next Leonardo DiCaprio. Truth be told, he was arguably the biggest teen heartthrob of the decade. Then, at the absolute peak of his fame, he did the unthinkable. He walked away. He left Home Improvement before its final season, a decision that shocked his castmates and the entire industry. He said he wanted to focus on his education, to go to school and just be a regular person. And he actually did it. He went to Harvard, he studied abroad at St. Andrews in Scotland, and he graduated from Columbia University. He made occasional guest appearances, such as on Last Man Standing, and directed projects, but largely stepped away from the spotlight. He traded superstardom for a private life, a deliberate retreat from fame. JTT chose to escape the fame machine to find a normal life. But our next star wasn't so lucky, finding herself pushed out of the spotlight for a truly heartbreaking reason. 2. Jamie Foxworth. For 5 seasons, the Winslow family was America's family on the hit sitcom Family Matters. We all knew the parents, Carl and Harriet, and the older kids, Eddie and Laura. And of course, there was the youngest daughter, the sweet and adorable Judy Winslow, played by Jamie Foxworth. She was a key part of the show's early dynamic, the cute kid who added to the family chaos. She was there from the very beginning, a foundational piece of a show that would become a cultural touchstone. And then, one day, she wasn't. In season 4, Judy Winslow walked upstairs to her room and was never seen or mentioned again. There was no explanation, no farewell episode. The writers just pretended she never existed. It's one of the most bizarre and cold decisions in sitcom history. Jamie Foxworth was suddenly out of a job, erased from the show that had been her home. The official reason was that her character had become unnecessary after Steve Urkel became the show's main focus. But for a young actress, being literally written out of history was a devastating blow. Her life after the show was met with immense personal and financial struggles. She tried to make ends meet in the world of adult entertainment, a path born out of the desperation that came after Hollywood cast her aside. Her story is a difficult reminder of how disposable young actors can be. Jamie's story is about being erased by the industry. But what happens when you're not erased, but instead defined forever by a single, bizarre role you can never escape? Our next star found out the hard way. 3. Tiffany Brissett. In the 80s, high-concept sitcoms were all the rage, and none was higher concept than Small Wonder. The show was about an engineer who creates a robot in the form of a 10-year-old girl named Vicky. He brings the robot home to live with his family, trying to pass her off as their adopted daughter. Playing the part of Vicky was Tiffany Brissett. Her role was incredibly challenging. She had to deliver her lines in a flat monotone and move with a stiff, robotic gait, all while wearing that iconic red dress and white apron. The show was a surprise hit in syndication, and Vicky the robot became an iconic 80s character. Tiffany was brilliant in the role, so convincing as a machine that people had a hard time seeing her as anything else. When the show ended after 4 seasons, Tiffany found it nearly impossible to get other acting jobs. Casting directors couldn't shake the image of her as Vicky. She was typecast in the most extreme way possible. She landed a few small parts but eventually grew tired of the struggle. Believe it or not, she decided to leave acting behind entirely. She went to college and became a registered nurse, choosing a life of helping people in a real way over a life of pretending to be a machine. She completely vanished from public life, preferring the quiet and stability of her new career. Tiffany was trapped by a character that was not human. Our next star played a very human character, but his real-life struggles led him down a path that took him far away from the camera. 4. Jeremy Miller. Growing Pains was one of the quintessential family sitcoms of the 80s. It was the show that launched Leonardo DiCaprio into the world and solidified Kirk Cameron as a major teen idol. But at the heart of the Seaver family was the mischievous and lovable youngest son, Ben Seaver, played by Jeremy Miller. We watched Jeremy grow up on screen, from a cute little kid into a wisecracking teenager. He was an essential part of the show's chemistry and a familiar face in millions of homes for 7 seasons. When the show ended, everyone expected Jeremy to continue acting, just like his co-stars. He had the charm and the experience. But behind the scenes, a very different story was unfolding. Truth be told, from a very young age, Jeremy had been battling a severe drinking problem, something that started when he was just a child. The pressures of fame and growing up in the public eye took a massive toll on him. After Growing Pains wrapped, he decided he needed to step away from the industry to focus on his health and sobriety. It was a brave and necessary choice. Today, he has spoken openly about his past struggles and works as a patient advocate for a treatment center, using his own difficult journey to help others. He vanished from our screens, but he re-emerged to save his own life. Jeremy had to leave the spotlight to battle his personal demons. Our next star's disappearance is less about personal struggle and more of a quiet mystery, a case of a rising star who just seemed to evaporate. Angela Watson. The 90s. TGIF lineup on ABC was a juggernaut of family-friendly television, and Step by Step was one of its biggest hits. The show was a modern-day Brady Bunch, featuring 2 families who come together when their single parents get married. Playing the role of the vain, boy-crazy, but ultimately sweet daughter, Karen Foster, was Angela Watson. For 7 seasons, she was a standout character, known for her aspiring modeling career and her funny, ditzy personality. She had great comedic timing and was a fan favorite. With her talent and classic good looks, Angela seemed destined for a long career in Hollywood after the show ended. But when Step by Step went off the air, she completely disappeared. There were no new roles, no interviews, no public appearances. It was as if she had fallen off the map. It turns out the reason for her vanishing act was a sad and complicated one. After turning 18, Angela discovered that her parents had allegedly spent nearly all of her earnings from the show, a sum totaling almost $3 million. The legal and emotional battle that followed took a huge toll on her. She decided to step away from the toxic environment of Hollywood and use her experience for good. She founded an organization called Child Actors Supporting Themselves, which helps child actors and other young performers protect their finances. Her vanishing act was a retreat, a way to heal and build a new life, helping others avoid the same fate. Angela's story is about being let down by those closest to her. The story of our next star, however, is about being defined by a catchphrase so huge it overshadowed his entire career. 6. Danny Pintauro. Who's the boss? In the 80s, the answer was Tony Danza, but a huge part of the show's heart was his on-screen son, Jonathan Bauer, played by Danny Pintauro. For 8 seasons on Who's the Boss, we watched Danny grow from a tiny, adorable kid into a young man. The show was a ratings giant, and Danny was one of the most recognizable child actors of his generation. He was part of an iconic television family alongside Tony Danza, Judith Light, and a young Alyssa Milano. A long career seemed all but guaranteed. After the show ended, Danny tried to continue acting. He studied drama at Stanford University and appeared in some stage productions and independent films, but he could never escape the shadow of Jonathan Bauer. To the world, he was still the little kid from Who's the Boss? The transition to adult roles proved incredibly difficult. At the same time, he was navigating his own personal journey, including coming out as gay in an era when that was still a huge challenge for a public figure. He eventually decided to leave the acting world behind for a more stable life. What's wild is that he pursued a completely different career, becoming a veterinary technician and later a manager for a restaurant. He has re-emerged in recent years as a powerful advocate for the LGBTQ community, sharing his personal story with honesty and grace. He vanished as an actor, but reappeared as an important voice. Danny found a new purpose after fame. Our next pair of stars also found a new purpose, but they did it by building an empire so massive it made their acting careers look like a footnote. 7. Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen. This is maybe the most famous vanishing act in Hollywood history. Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen were more than child stars. They were an industry. They got their start before they could even talk, sharing the role of the adorable Michelle Tanner on the mega-hit sitcom Full House. As they grew, their popularity exploded. They weren't just on TV, they were a brand. They had their own movies, their own book series, their own fashion line, their own everything. They were two of the wealthiest and most powerful young women in the world. Their last major acting role together was in the 2004 movie New York Minute. After that, they made a conscious and deliberate decision to disappear from the acting world. They had spent their entire lives in front of a camera, and they were done. They turned their focus entirely to fashion, building their brands. The Roe and Elizabeth and James into critically acclaimed and massively successful high fashion labels. They became respected designers, known for their unique aesthetic and their intense desire for privacy. They rarely give interviews but remain prominent in fashion, with their brands The Roe and Elizabeth and James featured in Vogue. They stepped away from acting, transforming from child stars to respected fashion moguls. Their disappearance from acting wasn't a failure, it was a pivot to an even bigger stage. The Olsen twins chose fashion over acting, but our next star didn't really get to choose. His life took a dark turn that made a return to the family-friendly world of sitcoms impossible. 8. Todd Bridges. In the late 70s and early 80s, Different Strokes was one of the biggest shows on television. It tackled serious issues with humor and heart, and at its center were three incredible child actors. While Gary Coleman became the breakout star, Todd Bridges was the anchor as his older brother, Willis Jackson. Todd was the cool, street-smart kid from Harlem, trying to adjust to a new life of wealth and privilege. He was a talented actor who portrayed the struggles of his character with a maturity beyond his years. But the show's famous catchphrase, "What you talking about, Willis?" hit a world of trouble. The pressures of being a young, famous black actor in that era were immense. As the show ended and he transitioned into adulthood, Todd's life spiraled downwards. He got involved with the wrong crowd and battled severe substance abuse issues for many years. His struggles became very public, with numerous run-ins with the law that completely derailed his career. For a long time, it seemed like he had vanished into a world of trouble from which he would never return. But believe it or not, this story has a positive ending. Todd fought hard to turn his life around. He got sober, rebuilt his relationships, and slowly started working again as an actor in smaller projects and as a comedian. His vanishing act was a fall from grace, but his comeback is a story of incredible resilience. Todd's journey was a battle back from the brink. The story of our next star is much quieter, a tale of a beloved TV daughter who simply chose a different dream. 9. Soleil Moon Frye, Punky Power. In the mid-'80s, every kid in America knew Punky Brewster. The show was about a plucky, clever little orphan girl with a unique fashion sense who gets taken in by a grumpy but kind old man. Playing Punky was the impossibly charismatic Soleil Moon Frye. With her mismatched sneakers and her dog Brandon, Punky was a cultural icon, and Soleil was at the center of it all. She was so famous, she even got to meet President Ronald Reagan at the White House. When Punky Brewster ended, Soleil continued to act. She had a major role on the show Sabrina the Teenage Witch as Roxy King, and she did a lot of voice work for cartoons. She never truly vanished in the way some others did, but she made a conscious choice to step back from being a full-time actress. Her focus shifted. She got married, had 4 children, and poured her energy into being a mother. What's more, she became an entrepreneur, opening an eco-friendly children's boutique and writing books about parenting and crafting. In recent years, she directed a deeply personal documentary about her life as a child star, using her old home videos to reflect on her unique childhood. So while she may have vanished from sitcoms, she simply reappeared as a mom, a business owner, and a director, taking control of her own story. Soleil took control of her own narrative. Our next star, however, had his narrative defined by a scandal that made him one of the most controversial figures to ever come from a children's show. 10. Dustin Diamond. For over a decade, the gang from Bayside High were our friends on Saved by the Bell. The show was a Saturday morning ritual for millions of kids. And while Zach Morris was the cool leader and Kelly Kapowski was the dream girl, the group's resident nerd was Samuel Screech Powers, played by Dustin Diamond. Dustin was on the show from its very beginning as Good Morning, Miss Bliss, all the way through its college years and spin-offs. He was the one constant, the lovable geek who was always there. But after the bell finally rang for the last time, Dustin's life took a very different and difficult turn. He found himself unable to escape the Screech persona. He was forever seen as the awkward sidekick, and it made finding serious acting work nearly impossible. In his desperation to break away from the character and make a name for himself, he made a series of poor choices. This included releasing a controversial adult home video and a scathing tell-all book about his time on the show, which he later admitted was full of exaggerations. These actions alienated him from his former castmates and the public. He spent years in the wilderness of reality TV and celebrity boxing, a shadow of his former self. His story took a tragic turn when he passed away from cancer in 2021. His vanishing act was a sad, slow fade, a story of a man who could never outrun the character he created. Dustin's story is a tragic one of being unable to escape a character. The story of our next star is also about being linked to one role, but her escape was a quiet and successful retreat into a completely normal life. 11. Lisa Jakub. Though she's best known for her movie roles, Lisa Jakub had a significant start in the world of sitcoms. She had a guest role in the short-lived sitcom George, starring Tony Danza, but is best known for playing Lydia Hillard in the film Mrs. Doubtfire. However, most people remember her as the rebellious older daughter, Lydia Hillard, in the classic Robin Williams movie Mrs. Doubtfire. She was a talented young actress, great at playing moody and intelligent teenagers. She worked steadily throughout her childhood and teens, appearing in big movies like Independence Day. It seemed like she was on the fast track to adult stardom, but at the age of 22, after a career that had lasted for most of her life, she had a moment of clarity. She realized the competition, the anxiety, and the focus on appearance in Hollywood was not making her happy. She didn't want that life anymore. So she quit. She got on a plane, left Los Angeles, and never looked back. She moved to Virginia, got married, and enrolled in college. She completely reinvented herself. She is now a successful writer, speaker, and yoga instructor. She has written books about her experiences with anxiety and about her decision to leave acting. Her vanishing act was one of the most decisive and successful on this list, a complete and total break from one life to build a new, happier one. Lisa made a clean break for her own well-being. Our next star also made a break, but his was less about well-being and more about answering a call to a higher purpose. 12. Kirk Cameron. As Mike Seaver on Growing Pains, Kirk Cameron was one of the biggest stars on the planet. He was the handsome, troublemaking older brother whose poster adorned the bedroom walls of millions of teenagers. He was a bona fide teen idol with a hit TV show and a budding movie career. He had everything a young star in Hollywood could possibly want, and it seemed like his future was limitless. The path to becoming a major movie star was wide open for him. But during the show's run, something profound changed for Kirk. He became a devout, born-again Christian, and his newfound faith began to reshape his entire worldview, including his views on his own show. He started to object to certain storylines on Growing Pains that he felt were too adult or inappropriate. His priorities shifted dramatically. After the show ended, he almost completely vanished from mainstream Hollywood. Instead of pursuing blockbuster movies, he dedicated his career to making faith-based films and working with evangelical ministries. He effectively walked away from the massive fame he had to follow a path he felt was more meaningful. It was a vanishing act from the secular world of entertainment, a deliberate choice to use his platform for a completely different purpose. Kirk's journey was guided by faith. Our next star's journey was also a quest for meaning, but it took him from the stage to the world of politics, a place few actors ever go. 13. Ross Bagley. In the 90s, if a sitcom needed a cute, funny kid, they called Ross Bagley. He burst onto the scene as Nicky Banks on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, playing Will Smith's adorable little cousin for the show's final 2 seasons. He had amazing chemistry with Will Smith, and their scenes together were always highlights. But that wasn't all. At the same time, he played Buckwheat in the movie adaptation of The Little Rascals, and even re-teamed with Will Smith to play his son in the blockbuster film Independence Day. For a few years, he was everywhere. He was one of the most successful child actors of the mid-90s. Then, as quickly as he arrived, he seemed to disappear. As he grew out of the cute kid phase, the major roles stopped coming. But Ross didn't fade into obscurity or trouble. Instead, he focused on his education. He enrolled at California State University, Northridge, where he studied cinema and television arts. He made a deliberate choice to step behind the camera. It turns out he had interned at Will Smith's production company, Overbrook Entertainment, wanting to learn the business side of Hollywood. While he still does occasional small acting roles and works as a DJ, his main focus shifted. He chose a life outside the intense glare of the spotlight, a quiet, vanishing act into a more normal, professional life. His story isn't one of drama, but of a smart kid planning for his future. Ross chose to step behind the camera. The story of our next star is about what happens when the camera just stops caring, and a beloved TV icon is left to find her own way. 14. Lark Voorhees. As Lisa Turtle on Saved by the Bell, Lark Voorhees was the fashion-forward, gossipy, and wealthy Bayside student who was the object of Screech's unrequited love. For years, she was a key part of one of pop culture's most famous ensemble casts. She was stylish, funny, and a fan favorite. When the show and its various spin-offs ended, she continued to work, appearing in soap operas and music videos, trying to transition into more adult roles. But over time, her public appearances became more and more infrequent and, for many fans, concerning. In rare interviews, her speech and demeanor raised concerns among fans. Her mother suggested she was managing a mental health condition, though Lark disputed this. She faced personal challenges that limited her public presence. Regardless of the specifics, it became clear she was navigating some serious personal challenges. She largely vanished from the acting world, retreating from public life. While she did make a brief, emotional appearance in the Saved by the Bell reboot, it served as a stark reminder of how long she had been away. Her disappearance was not a choice in the way others were, but seemingly a consequence of personal struggles that made the demanding world of Hollywood an impossible place to be. Lark's retreat was complicated by personal struggles. Our next star's story is much simpler. A case of a kid who was part of a TV dynasty and then simply chose to live like a normal person. 15. Michael Fishman. For 9 seasons, the Connor family on Roseanne felt like a real American family. They were loud, they were messy, and they were relatable. And the youngest member of the clan was DJ Connor, played by Michael Fishman. Michael was just 6 years old when the show started, and audiences watched him grow up on screen, delivering sarcastic one-liners and dealing with the chaos of his family. He was an integral part of one of the most successful and critically acclaimed sitcoms of all time. When the show ended its original run in 1997, Michael, then a teenager, effectively vanished from acting. He had spent his entire childhood on a TV set and was ready for a different life. He did a few guest spots here and there, but his passion shifted to working behind the camera. He focused on roles like set building, camera operating, and eventually directing and producing. He got married and became a father, embracing a quiet, suburban life far away from the pressures of being a famous actor. He made a surprising return to the spotlight when he reprised his role as DJ in the Roseanne revival and its spin-off, The Conners. But his long absence was a clear choice, a story of a kid who did the job, did it well, and then happily clocked out to go live a regular life. Michael chose a regular life behind the scenes. Our next star's story is a mystery wrapped in a rumor, a vanishing act so complete that for years, nobody was sure what happened to him. 16. Josh Saviano. The Wonder Years was more than a sitcom. It was a piece of television art. It was a nostalgic look back at growing up in the 60s, narrated by a wistful adult. The show's main character was Kevin Arnold, and his best friend was the nerdy, brilliant, and fiercely loyal Paul Pfeiffer, played by Josh Saviano. With his thick glasses and recurring allergies, Paul was the quintessential nerdy best friend, but Josh played him with so much heart that he became an iconic and beloved character. When the Wonder Years ended, Josh Saviano disappeared so completely from public life that a bizarre urban legend started to spread. The rumor was that Josh Saviano had grown up to become the controversial rock star Marilyn Manson. This rumor became so widespread in the pre-internet fact-checking era that it became a piece of pop culture lore. It was, of course, completely untrue. The real story is much less sensational. Josh simply quit acting. He went to Yale University, majored in political science, and then went to law school. He became a successful corporate lawyer in New York. His vanishing act was so total that people had to invent a crazy story to explain it. He just grew up and got a different job, the ultimate normal life disappearing act. Josh's disappearance sparked a wild rumor. But what happens when the disappearance isn't a rumor, but a sad reality of a promising life cut short? 17. Dana Plato. Dana Plato was a vital part of the trio that made Diff'rent Strokes a cultural phenomenon. She played Kimberly Drummond, the kind and wealthy teenage daughter who welcomed her new adopted brothers, Willis and Arnold, into her home. She was the picture of the perfect girl next door, a beautiful and charming actress who seemed to have a bright future ahead of her. For several seasons, she was one of the most famous teenagers on television. However, behind the scenes, Dana's life was far from perfect. She began to struggle with personal demons, including substance abuse problems. Her troubles led to her being written off the show, as the producers felt her off-screen life didn't fit with the show's family-friendly image. This was the beginning of a long and tragic downward spiral. After leaving the show, she found it almost impossible to find work. She posed for adult magazines and acted in low-budget films, trying to recapture some of her former fame and make a living. Her ongoing struggles with addiction and legal issues marked a challenging life, noted by a public interview on Howard Stern's radio show. Sadly, she passed away in 1999 due to complications from her personal battles. Her vanishing act from the spotlight was not a choice, but a tragic fall that she could never recover from.